So I'm a part of the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty. A lot of people here know about OCAP, but in case you don't, OCAP is an anti-poverty organization that has been fighting against poverty in this province, in this city, and in particular in this neighborhood for 25 years. We do a bunch of things. We fight for ultimately an end to poverty in this province and around the world. We work in solidarity with organizations all over the world, including DPAC, who we'll hear from later. And we also have recently been in touch with disabled people in Korea who have been fighting for more accessibility there, and different poor folks and disabled folks across the planet. And is this better? Can folks hear? Okay. So we fight for decent, affordable, accessible housing for all. We fight for a raise in social assistance rates. As people know, they're shamefully low. The cut that Mike Harris implemented in 1995 for welfare was 21.6%. And today, with inflation, that equals 55%. So we're calling for a raise in social assistance rates of 55% for everyone. And as people may... As people may know, we're under the cloud of an election right now, and all of the parties are attacking social assistance rate to varying degrees. So Tim Hudak is calling to eliminate ODSP. The Liberals have said that they're not going to eliminate ODSP, but have not promised to not implement a number of really problematic, devastating cuts or changes for people on social assistance in general. And the NDP allowed a budget to pass that cut the community startup, which was really essential money for people in this province to find and keep housing. So regardless of what people want to do around the election, it's important that we come together tonight and that we fight back together. And one of the things that's been happening during this election and over the years is that people have been pitted against each other. Particularly people on welfare and people on ODSP have been pitted against each other. And it's the same people that are attacking all of us and that are attacking working people in this province. And it's important that we all come together and say that we're not going to fight against each other for crumbs. We're going to fight to take the pie back. So I'm really excited tonight. Tonight is the last night of a speaking tour that OCAP has been doing with the support of QP Ontario and with Ellen from DPAC. And folks have spoken in North Bay, Sudbury, Ottawa, Montreal, Kingston, and Kitchener. And the crowds there have been really, really great. And one of the important things that's come out of that is new conversations about organizing to raise the rates. And that's something that we hope that we can do here tonight as well. People are really excited about this campaign, and everybody knows that social assistance rates are too low if we're on social assistance. But one thing that's really, I think, changing and really important is that people are renewing a struggle to raise those rates and to keep the benefits that exist for social assistance. So we are going to have a couple of speakers, and then we will have a couple videos and time for questions and to have a bit of a discussion. And first up, I want to invite Carrie Lynn Poole-Cottom from QP Ontario that has been really important in allowing this event and this speaking tour to happen.
Take up a lot of your time because I think that the main show is going to get started soon. But I did want to say I'm so impressed with the turnout and the ability to mobilize folks to come out to hear this very important message. The way in which we've kind of framed this is that in the event that we had a Hudak government, or in the event the Liberals continue to dismantle social assistance, it completely mirrors what's happening in the UK and how DPAC is fighting back. So I think it's important for us to recognize that probably only 1 or 2 years ahead of us, and there's many lessons to be learned about how we mobilize in the future. Organizing this tour was an absolute blast. I'm so glad I'm able to join you on the last night. logistics coming out of being Yang, you can imagine, but definitely worth it, and I really hope that you help me welcome Ellen.
Thanks, Carrie Lynn. We're going to have Alicia Cuff speak now, and Alicia is an OCAP member and a long-time organizer working on disability, queer, trans, and anti-poverty issues.
All right, can you all hear me? Awesome, cheers. Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm currently in the process of applying for ODSP, and I've been on welfare at many points in my life. Disability rights and the rights of the poor are close to my heart, so I'm really glad to be here myself tonight to hear Ellen of DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts UK, to speak on the situation in the United Kingdom. If any of you have been following that story through alternative media, you already know of the brutal cuts to programs for the unemployed and people with disabilities there. I look forward to hearing Ellen's first-hand experience with the struggle to resist these inhumane policies. These policies which seem part and parcel with the austerity agenda. Here in Ontario, our Liberal Premier Kathleen Wynne frames herself as the social justice premier. Though actual government policy hardly reflects a vision of social justice recognizable for those of us who fight for it daily. We've got a provincial election coming on June 12th in Ontario, and as often the case, electoral politics leaves those of us impacted by poverty and disability with an anxious hope for the least worst outcome. While Tim Hudak and the Provincial Conservative Party are being quite transparent in their goals to erode workers' rights and roll back the social safety net, the ruling Liberals still threaten to do a lot of damage if they remain in power. Their Commission for Review of Social Assistance in Ontario, the Lankin Report, outlines a number of suggestions which would be disastrous for unemployed people and people with disabilities. Here's a brief accounting of what the Lankin Report would do to social assistance. Both OW, basic welfare, and ODSP recipients could face the outright elimination of the special diet benefit. This benefit, as many of you know, allows those with dietary needs to afford the foods they need to stay healthy. As well, municipalities would be given a block fund for special benefits to distribute at their discretion. These special benefits would include non-health travel to things such as volunteer work or funerals, guide dog benefits, and others. Perhaps most alarming is the suggestion that recipients who live with another adult face a 14% cut to their check on the ridiculous assumption that living with another person means you can then share resources. Those on ODSP face specific cuts suggested by the report, most ominously the call for participation agreements with pathway for employment plans. These are the same kinds of agreements to develop a plan to get paid work that welfare recipients face. If the plans follow the outline set for OW recipients, then those on ODSP can expect scheduled check-ins with workers and could lose their benefits if they don't go or haven't met the conditions of this plan. At the same time, the report suggests the elimination of the work-related benefit, an option for people on ODSP to work part-time and keep some of their earnings. This simultaneous trumpeting the call of back to work while erasing other work-related benefits is just yet another of the confusing paradoxes of austerity thinking. As well, the Lankin Report makes vague comments about harmonizing the dental coverage of all people on social assistance without explaining specifically what that would mean. I can only imagine that it doesn't mean raising the level of dental benefits for those on OW to the levels available to people on ODSP, and would instead result in a net negative outcome for all. The report does prioritize the elimination of the backlog of medical reviews as a priority, and while on the surface this might seem like a measure to increase responsiveness to recipients' needs, when looking at programs in other locations, such as the UK, the reality would be money for whatever assessment process best suited to get people off benefits. As is often the case, there would be money to spend on third-party businesses to profit in administering the programs, but not for the recipients of the programs themselves. And remember, these are all suggestions from a ruling party whose leader imagines herself as a champion of social justice. Meanwhile, Tim Hudak and the Provincial Conservatives released their 2014 campaign platform today. And amongst the typical austerity bluster about job creation, while cutting public jobs at a grand scale, of course, is their plan to combine OW and ODSP. Although he spoke of vague plans to expand opportunities for people with disabilities to attend post-secondary education, Hudak says a big part of his job plan is getting more people with disabilities into the workforce. As anyone who's followed the situation in the UK knows, this kind of coded policy language hides much darker motives. Still, there has been much to celebrate in our collective struggle. Over the past year, OCAP has fought a similar plan by the ruling provincial Liberals to merge ODSP into OW. But after facing the combined resistance of OCAP and others, they have backed down. The Ontario, yes, we should applaud that. That's actually worth applauding. Woo! The Ontario Minister of Community and Social Services has written, "I can tell you clearly that having looked at the idea of a merger of these two programs, our government will not be going forward with that recommendation." Once again, awesome. And though the special diet has been gutted, the intent in 2010 was to remove it completely, and pushing back prevented that from happening. So it's so good to see you all here tonight, because our strength to resist comes from working together. The unemployed, working people, people with disabilities, all of us who are threatened by austerity measures, together we can make change. The looming provincial election would serve to remind us that change happens at the ballot box, but we know differently. Yes. Change happens not when political parties shuffle seats at Queen's Park, but when people come together and demand it. In the streets, on the internet, in organizing, at meetings like this. As long as we express our refusal to accept the status quo, we are fighting back. We can fight back and fight to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Now we're going to watch two quite quick videos about the resistance that's going on in the UK. And while we feel the cuts in our communities and in our own lives, it's important that we not lose track of the fact that it's part of a global change, a global turn to cuts, to austerity, to making capitalism stronger and more brutal. And in the UK, that has happened very immediately in people's lives. And so we look to folks in the UK both for the inspiration for what they've won and for hopefully something that we have an idea of what is planned for us and what we need to be fighting back against. And just so people have an idea of the scope of where things are at right now, we're told constantly that we need to be tightening our belts, but we know that it's poor people that are being cut and that our benefits, our housing, our food is being cut while the rich keep getting richer. And Tim Hudak is announcing that he wants to put in a 30% corporate tax cut. And the Liberals have been putting in different tax cuts for the rich at our expense. And in the world right now, there are 67 billionaires who own as much as the poorest half of the world's population. 67 people have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. And yet it's poor people who are being told that we have to cut back and we have to lose our services and our support, and it's outrageous. And it is part of a global program of austerity that we all need to fight here in our own communities, in our streets, but while looking across the world and looking to solidarity with everyone. So here are the videos about DPAC.
Thank you. Brothers and sisters, it's my absolute honour to be here in Toronto tonight, bringing solidarity from the UK and from disabled people against cuts, or DPAC as we're known. The fight is never easy. We take our wins where we can and we celebrate them, but then we have to move on because we still have a war to win. And within that war, the value of solidarity is absolutely immense. This is the last night of this tour, and I very much hope that this is not an end, but it's a beginning for greater sharing of our ideas and for joining up of international resistance. Because our governments get together to share their ideas on how they can make the poor pay for a financial crisis that we didn't cause. So just as they get to join up and share their ideas, I think it's important that we also join up and we share our ideas for how we can fight back. I'm very proud of what DPAC has achieved since we set up in 2010. We've never been about individuals, which is why it's kind of weird me just being here, and why I'm so happy that we were able to see the films and to see everyone else who's part of DPAC. What we've been about is collective struggle, and now DPAC comprises a movement of thousands of grassroots disabled people up and down throughout England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and working so closely with our fantastic sister campaign, Black Triangle, in Scotland. DPAC was set up to fight back against vicious and brutal cuts that were being inflicted on the poorest members of society, on disabled people, by our Tory government. But if the Tories thought disabled people were going to be an easy target, then DPAC proved them very, very wrong. In June 2012, John McDonnell, an MP in the Houses of Parliament, he warned the government. He said to them, these people and these issues are not going to go away. We are now seeing a disability movement in this country of which we've never seen the equal before. Black Triangle occupied Atos offices in Scotland. DPAC chained themselves in Trafalgar Square. These people are mobilising. They're going to be in your face, and rightly so. And we have been. We've been maintaining constant pressure, even when levels of struggle around us have been getting low. We've been developing a model of resistance that can fight back and that can win. When DPAC set up, it was in response to a need for national coordinated resistance against the disproportionate impact of austerity on disabled people. As I said in the film, research has shown that disabled people with the highest levels of support need are being hit 19 times harder than the average other person by the impact of the cuts. That's just not fair, and we're just not all in it together. By the end of this Parliament, disabled people will have lost more than £28 billion in benefits and entitlements. And disabled people didn't have much before. Before this government came in, disabled people were twice as likely as anyone else to live in poverty. And now things have got much, much worse, with the biggest shake-up of the welfare system that we've seen since it was created, with some disabled people being hit by up to 6 or more benefit cuts at the same time. So DPAC knew that there needed to be a fight back, and we knew that it needed to be disabled people leading that fight back. As a campaign with very little organisational infrastructure, we have no paid staff, we have little funding. But what that means is that DPAC doesn't face the same constraints that some of the disabled people's organisations do face, the agencies I think we call them here. We can speak out against what we see is wrong, and also about the vision for a society that we want to create. We grew organically as a grassroots movement from the bottom up. Disabled people flocked to us because they needed a channel for their anger to be able to fight back. So we found we had to open up for membership. We ended up having to elect a steering committee. We've got a constitution now. We've also got local groups active around the whole of England and Wales because disabled people on the ground want to be fighting back. Our way of organising can be very fluid, and it needs to be in order to be properly inclusive of people with fluctuating conditions and different support needs. But from the beginning, we were set up on the basis of some very fundamental core principles. One of those is the social model of disability, and that's basically the idea that there's nothing wrong with us as disabled people. It's society that's got the problem by excluding and marginalising us. Society needs to change, not us. Believe that disabled people should have rights, not charity. We shouldn't need to be dependent on the beneficence of other people who have power over us to get equality. We were also set up specifically to work with the left and with the trade union movement, with the wider anti-cuts groups, and that's perhaps the most controversial of all of our principles. But it's because we understood that what's happening to disabled people is part of a much wider ideological agenda that seeks to dismantle our welfare state, slashing benefits and privatising large chunks, shoveling public finance into the private pockets of people who've already got too much. By attacking welfare, the government can then much more easily move in and attack workers. If life out of work is made simply unviable, then workers can be more easily forced to accept ever worsening terms and conditions. We've seen a dramatic rise in insecure employment and what we call zero-hour contracts. which is where people have no guarantee of work from one week to the next. People are forced off benefits if they don't accept zero-hour contracts. We've seen a massive rise of in-work poverty over the last year. That's risen by 59%. And as wages drop in real terms, while the cost of living increases, work no longer pays, it can't sustain, and poverty is soaring. Meanwhile, the rich are getting richer. Last year in the UK, the super rich increased their wealth by £56 billion, and that's at a time of supposed austerity. Shame. For the first time ever in the UK, we now have over 100 billionaires. That's triple the number of billionaires that we had a decade ago. And apparently we've now got more billionaires per capita than anywhere else. That's what our Tory government has done. Faced with an ideological agenda this wide and deliberate and nasty, disabled people recognise that we can't effectively fight back on our own. We need to be part of a much wider resistance. And so we should be, because I think one of the mistakes that the disabled people's rights movement in the UK made over the past few years is that we tended to campaign in isolation. We've unwittingly undermined the welfare state by playing into the hands of the marketisation agenda. It also perpetuated the segregation of disabled people. Disabled people fought long and hard to get out of the institutions and to be part of our communities, and that's where we belong. The things that hurt our wider communities also matter to us. Fracking and climate change, hospital closures, fire station closures, all of that's important to us too, and we want to be there alongside our communities fighting back. It's through this more outward-looking focus and deliberate building of wider networks of solidarity that's enabled DPAC to punch the holes in austerity that we have done. One of our biggest battles has been against the Work Capability Assessment, or WCA, run by Atos, and that's what those films we saw earlier focused on. The WCA is a test. It tests eligibility for long-term out-of-work benefits. On the film you heard Andy the Irishman, talking about the WCA and why it's so absolutely flawed. You also saw the memorial service we held last September for its victims. The WCA was designed specifically to get people off benefits. As Andy said, a man who was in a coma was found fit for work. A Freedom of Information request found that over the period between January 2010 and January 2011, 10,600 people died shortly after being found fit for work. Those were clearly not people fit for work. Some of those deaths were due to suicides, to people who couldn't bear the idea of continuing on without any means of survival or income. Some of those people were terminally ill. Cecilia Burns is just one example of many. Cecilia from Northern Ireland, she died from terminal cancer within weeks of having been found fit for work. She clearly was not fit for work. Many other people have had serious conditions. Those serious conditions have been aggravated by having a test done and finding out that their benefits have stopped. So the death rate has been very high. Atos and the government have blood on their hands. In fact, one of our members got arrested for saying that David Cameron had blood on his hands. Thousands and thousands have died at the hands of this cruel and inhumane regime of assessment. And yet we've had to fight really hard to expose what's been going on. And that's because our government has tried to hide it behind this vicious lies, misinformation and a calculated targeting of benefit claimants. There's this relentless narrative of benefit scroungers, of work-shy cheats, of fakers and fraudsters. Members of the public actually think that disability benefit fraud must be as high as anything between 40 and 70%, and that's because of this constant messaging from government and the right-wing media. Actually, by the government's own figures, disability benefit fraud is no higher than 0.5%. Time after time, the government has been caught out lying with their friends in the media, helping them spread misinformation far and wide, and trying to create a brutal idea of the deserving and the undeserving poor. So in the face of the scale and level of attack we're facing with disabled people, hit simultaneously by benefit cuts at the same time as the social services that we depend on are being slashed, it would be easy to be discouraged. But just as disabled people have been at the sharp end of the attacks, so we've been at the absolute forefront of the fight back. And that's something I'm proud of because it's in stark contrast to traditional images of disabled people that see us as burdens of society, that see us as objects of pity and needy and vulnerable and helpless. What DPAC has shown is that disabled people are determined, capable and organised fighters. When we started campaigning, no one had heard of Atos. Now Atos is a household name. Now everyone in the UK knows that Atos is scum who push disabled people off benefits and into poverty, death and misery. DPAC used a range of tactics to get them. Firstly, it was important to expose what was going on in order to create the kind of pressure that was needed to change things. But no amount of evidencing, researching and collecting of statistics, however important that is to get the wider public on your side, was going to divert the politicians and the big businesses from their neoliberal agenda. We also needed to cause major disruption to their operations and hit them where it hurt, with profits. We achieved that partly by building awareness and arming individual disabled people with the knowledge of how to beat the WCA and cause disruption to Atos. We told everyone to ask for a recording when they went along. That was so it would be less easy for the people testing them to make up lies about how they were fit for work. But it was also because we knew there were only 11 recording systems across the whole country. So by people demanding them, it caused absolute chaos getting those recording systems travelling up and down the country. We shared information on how to appeal. Disabled people using social media or face-to-face would share information about how you get through the WCA and how you appeal it, how you fight back. The rate for overturned decisions at appeal is just under 40%, but for people with legal representation, that figure actually rises to around 80%. So £150 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on appeals and tribunals. The thing is that once people appeal, even if the decision is overturned, they can get called up again. So what we've seen by Atos is a constant hounding of people caught in a continual cycle of assessments and appeals that's so distressing to people. The other thing the government have done to reduce the number of appeals is to get rid of legal aid for welfare cases. So now people just don't have access to that form of justice. We've used our networks of wider support to organise days of Twitter and phone jams to bother Atos. We organised mass protests shutting down Atos headquarters for days at a time. We organised local actions outside their assessment centres up and down the country, blockading them and stopping assessments for the day. Our allies in the trade unions supported low-paid Atos workers to take industrial action and strike over pay, and we joined them on the picket lines. The more action we took, the more support grew for DPAC. The more empowered disabled people became, the more people saw that we didn't just have to take it in fear and isolation. We could fight back against what was happening. Through the constant pressure we were putting on, we got the attention of mainstream journalists who sent undercover reporters into Atos. That helped to expose what was going on and reveal it to the wider public. It also confirmed what we suspected all along, was that they were working to targets. Each of their assessors had a set number of people they could find eligible for benefits each week. If they went over that, they would get disciplined. So it didn't matter who they saw or what level of support needs those people actually had, whether they were fit for work or not. They were going to make sure they met their targets. Our biggest breakthrough was when we took the opportunity that was presented when Atos decided to sponsor the London 2012 Paralympic Games. Working with UK Uncut and other allies, we made maximum use of the publicity surrounding the Paralympics. We organised a week of action against Atos. One of the things we did was to hold a memorial service, not the one you saw there, that was more recent. We held a memorial service outside their headquarters, and we presented a coffin that was filled with letters to Atos from Atos victims and their families. That got major news attention. We also held, on the final day of our week of action, the mass protest, which you saw in the film with Andy. We had a mass protest outside Atos' headquarters, but meanwhile there was that group of people you saw who went into the Department for Work and Pensions and they occupied the foyer. Then we took the hundreds of people from Atos outside the government to show solidarity to the people who were occupying inside, and that got coverage on all the major news channels. The next week after our week of action, David Cameron and George Osborne, the Chancellor, tried to hand out medals to the Paralympians in the Olympic Stadium. And when 80,000 people booed those men, we knew that people knew what was happening. And that was really the turning point. After that, the media were falling over themselves to cover stories about people who'd been found fit for work when they shouldn't have been. Whistleblowers came out of Atos and apologised for having worked there and told us how vicious and nasty the regime is inside there. People working within the Department for Work and Pensions started leaking us stuff that gave us more ammunition to fight back. The Green Party started holding national days of action to continue the local actions around the local assessment centres. And Atos hating became such a safe issue that even the Labour Party came out and said that they would scrap Atos if they got into power in 2015. But the fact is that disabled people don't have time to wait till 2015. Every day longer under the Tories, people are dying. There's more avoidable misery and injustice. So we kept the pressure on. And in February this year, Atos announced that they want out of the WCA contract. And our allies have this multi-million-pound company on the run. It's an important victory. It's a blow against privateers and against the nasty Tories. It's a win for the grassroots. But as I said earlier, we're winning battles. We're winning against Atos. We've scored victories around the bedroom tax. And what we're hoping to do later this year is to score victories over the Independent Living Fund. And there's postcards over there for the Independent Living Fund campaign. Just quickly to explain that one, our government has closed the ILF, which provides support for disabled people with the highest level of need to live in the community. The consequence of taking that away will be a return to the institutions. So that's something we're fighting back against this summer. So yeah, watch out for what we do this summer. It's been frustrating for disabled people to see. We can see how weak and divided our government is. We can see that we can fight back, that the 99% are bigger than they are, but the overall level of struggle hasn't been high enough. There was a high point immediately after the Tories got in. There were student protests against tuition fees. There was N30, the biggest strike we'd seen in the UK since 1926. But after that, the level of struggle died down. There was this awful tendency of waiting the Tories out, waiting for Labour to get in. We couldn't wait, so DPAC kept at it. We kept growing, we kept escalating, we kept widening our base. That isn't easy. Whilst it's so important to relate more widely and engage more people in the struggle, it can also be difficult. When you're coming across groups of people that you want to make alliances with, but who may never have worked with disabled people before, you have to keep starting again from the beginning about explaining access issues. It can be tough. But the stakes are really high, and not to relate more widely, to shut ourselves down, would have meant missing chances to unite our resistance. DPAC has won credibility among those desperate for a fight back. We've made it so that we can't be ignored. As one trade unionist recently told me, DPAC completely changed the rules of the game. We've used the networks of solidarity we've built up to put pressure on the trade union movement and the wider anti-cuts movement, to demand action rather than endless talking. Now I'm going back to the UK, looking forward to a hot summer that promises to combine disabled people's activism, community organising and coordinated national industrial action. The model of resistance that's developed is a model that can win. When our side comes together, when we collectivise our struggle, when we unite, when we fight, we are powerful and we can force change. So fight to win. Austerity is global, so is our resistance. Solidarity.
Thank you, Ellen. So we're going to have a chance to have a conversation, to ask questions, to talk about how we're going to fight back in this city. But just a couple things before we do that. First off, there is ASL interpretation available if you would like to use it. And so the interpreters are over here if you want to let them know that you're here. Also, it's important that we organize together. So coming to this meeting, some of you, this might be the first political thing that you've ever done. Great, that's checked off the list. But it's not enough. We have to do so much more, and we have to build a movement to fight back. And so there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do, and Zoe's going to come up here and tell you about one of them in 1 second. But one thing that you can do is you can sign up on the OCAP list if you're not already getting emails or phone calls from OCAP, so that we can keep you in touch. Another small thing that you can do is you can get your photo taken to support the Independent Living campaign in the UK. And one really important thing that all of us can do is we can all talk to people. We can talk to people in our buildings, we can talk to people at the welfare office or the ODSP office, we can talk to folks we work with, our friends, our families, and we can begin to educate why we need to fight back, what the issues are, and how we're going to fight back together. That's really key. But there's no role that is too small when we're building a fight back. All of us have something to contribute, and it's really important that we all bring what we can to build that movement.